Hello guys, welcome to an Academic Decathlon Microeconomics video. Today we're going to be discussing demand, which is, in my opinion, if you're first learning economics, one of the most difficult things to wrap your head around, and yet it's such a fundamental and important concept. And so I'm going to kind of slow down a little bit for this video, try to go more into depth so that you can completely understand what's going on with demand. So first, to talk about demand, we need to talk about quantity demanded. And quantity demanded, it's kind of self-explanatory. It's the amount that people are going to want to buy just at a time. And that's really dependent on price. So quantity demanded and price are really linked by something called the law of demand. And the law of demand states that quantity demanded and price have a negative relationship. Well, what does this mean? It means that as the price goes up, quantity demanded will go down. As the price goes down, quantity demanded will go up. They move in reverse of each other. It's a negative relationship. And this makes sense. If things are more expensive, people are going to want to buy less. If things are cheaper, people are going to want to buy more. But what's the economics reason behind this? And that's as the price keeps increasing, people's opportunity cost to purchase that good or service also keeps increasing. And so their other options to buy or save start to seem relatively better. So it all links back to opportunity cost. But using the law of demand, we can create something called a demand schedule. And no, it's not like a time where you're going to demand certain things. It's a chart of how much quantity demanded there is at certain prices. So we have price, and then we have quantity demanded. And let's just say this is in a random market for teddy bears, and this is the quantity demanded of a guy named Jeff. So Jeff really likes teddy bears. So when they're $20 a teddy bear, he'll buy 5. When they're $10 a teddy bear, he'll buy 10. When they're $5 a teddy bear, he'll buy 30. Jeff really likes his teddy bears. So we can take this demand schedule and make it into something called the demand curve. And the demand curve is just a graph of demand. So we're going to draw our axes here. We're going to have quantity demanded, or just quantity, on the x-axis. We're going to have price on the y-axis. And remember, there's a negative relationship between quantity demanded and price due to the law of demand. So our curve is going to be downward sloping. And also, if you look at the demand schedule, at a higher price is going to be a lower quantity demanded. But at a higher price there's going to be a lower quantity demanded, and at a lower price, there's going to be a higher quantity demanded. And so we can go ahead and draw our demand curve. It might be confusing. I say curve and then I drew a straight line. Really, in reality, it's a curved line, but we use straight lines just to simplify things because it would get really messy with a bunch of curved lines on a graph. So just understand that. So here we have the quantity demanded for Jeff. You have Jeff's demand schedule. But what if we have someone else? What if we have Alice? And let's say Alice, she doesn't like teddy bears as much as Jeff does. So at $20, she'd only buy 1. At $10, she'd buy maybe 5. And at $5, she'll buy like 8. So at every single price, Alice's quantity demanded is less than Jeff's quantity demanded. And when someone's quantity demanded, or just a market in general, is less than the quantity demanded at every price of someone else or a different market, that means that there is less demand. You see, Alice's demand is less because her quantity demanded is less at every price. Do not mix those terms up. Demand and quantity demanded are different. Quantity demanded is at each given price. Demand is more the generalized term, because you can see that Jeff demands more than Alice. It's at every single price. He has more quantity demanded. It's kind of hard to explain this concept, but I think you get it. Demand is more general. Quantity demanded is more at a specific price. And because of this, Alice's demand curve is now, let's just say DJ. Alice's demand curve at every single price, she's going to demand less, quantity demanded less. And so her curve is going to be to the left. So when we have these graphs and stuff, to the left means less, to the right means more. And so Jeff's demand curve is to the right of Alice's because he has a greater demand than Alice. And same thing at like $15 here. you can see that Jeff has more quantity demanded than Alice. I hope this is making sense. I know this is a pretty difficult concept, but I'm going to give another example after this, hopefully to clarify things even more. So how do you find the market demand curve? So let's just say that Jeff and Alice are the only people who buy teddy bears in this market. So in order to find the market demand curve, you just add together everything. So at $20, there's 5 plus 1, that's 6. 10 plus 5, 15. 30 plus 8, that's 38. Okay, so clearly the market demand curve, the quantity demanded as the market, is greater than any individual. So the demand curve for the market, is it going to be to the left, to the right of Jeff's demand curve? Is it going to be like over here? Is it going to be in the middle? Well, if you're right, it would be, well, on the right, because it has greater demand than a singular individual. And notice how I added the quantities horizontally, not to scale, but you add the quantities horizontally, you do not add it vertically. It's completely horizontal because you're adding the quantity demanded at each price. Okay, just to give another example here, let's imagine if we had a third person in it. We have Susan. And she decides that she likes teddy bears even more than Jeff, even more than this entire market. She goes like 100,000, like 9999 over 9,000. And so Susan's demand curve is like way out here, because notice how she has way more than even that market. And then let's imagine that she's in the market. So you take Susan plus the market, you add these things together, and the market is way less than Susan, so it'll only just be slightly more to the right. So that's kind of how you shift demand curves. Right means greater demand, left means less demand. And remember, do not confuse quantity demanded and demand. And this is going to be even more clear in a second. So like quantity demanded can only change really because of the change in price. So let's just go back to Alice's demand curve here. If the price increases, her quantity demanded is going to decrease. If the price decreases, her quantity demanded is going to increase. But notice how that doesn't change her demand curve at all. It's only moving about the original demand curve. So price changes quantity demanded, not demand itself. Okay. So what does change demand itself? So I'm going to go ahead and draw another demand curve. It's good practice. Quantity on the x-axis, price on the y-axis. And remember, demand is downward sloping. I think about this by saying demand goes down. So it's a downward sloping line. Okay, the first thing that can change it is income, changes in income. So you think if income generally just goes up, then demand is also going to increase, right? And you'd be right in most situations. And these are goods called normal goods. So in normal goods, when income increases, the demand for the normal good also increases. These are things like luxury cars, vacations, even eating out. All these are normal goods. Most things are normal goods, that's why it's normal. But then the reverse of that is the inferior goods. And inferior goods, whenever income goes up, the demand for these goods go down. These are things like bus rides or used clothing. Because as people get richer and richer, they're less dependent on these things, and so they switch over to more luxury products. And so using our graph over here, if let's say the income of a town went up significantly, what would happen to the demand for bus rides? Now, bus rides are an inferior good, so if the income rose, that means the demand would decrease. So which way does it shift? Remember, right is an increase, left is a decrease. So this would be the new demand curve for the bus rides if the income increased. And if bus rides happen to be a normal good, then the demand curve would shift to the right. It would go the opposite direction. The next thing that can shift it is expectations. So this more goes for an individual with like job security and stuff. So if someone suspects that they're going to get a major raise in the future, they're probably going to spend more now knowing that they're going to get a lot more money in the future. But if they suspect they're going to lose their job in the future, they're probably going to hold back on spending, so their demand curve for everything will go down, will decrease, will shift to the left, because they need to save money knowing they're going to probably lose a lot in the future. For the entire market, this kind of corresponds with the stock market and just the general health of the economy. When people think that the economy is going to do well, then the demand curve increases, goes to the right. But when people think there's a recession incoming, they know that a lot of people are going to lose their jobs, and so the demand curve shifts to the left. The other thing is tastes. So if all of a sudden people think that blueberries are the future to eternal life, then the demand for blueberries is going to go up. Whereas if there's a shocking new report that flying on airplanes will hurt the environment by 1,000%, then the demand for airplane rides is probably going to go down as the tastes are shifting. So just tastes alone can actually shift the demand curve. And just one person's taste will shift their personal demand curve. It probably won't have much of an effect on the market, but there are those times where those news reports come out and just the general taste of the entire market changes. There's also the number of buyers. And so remember when we had the market demand curve from Alice's and Jeff's, we added them together. So if there was another buyer, it would increase it, like when we added Susan. So the more number of buyers, that will increase the demand. The less buyers, that's going to decrease the demand, just because the market demand curve is found by adding up all the number of buyers. And then the final thing are related goods. And there's two types. There's complements and there's substitutes. So complements are things like chips and salsa, or cars and gasoline, whereas substitutes are things like Coke and Pepsi, or Chevy and Ford trucks. Complements, they complement each other, they go together well. Substitutes, if you didn't have one, you could have the other, it would be about the same. So with complements, if the price of one of the complements goes up, then that means the demand for the other one will go down. And think about this. If you have chips and salsa, if the price of salsa suddenly skyrockets, then less people are going to buy salsa because the quantity demanded for salsa is less due to the higher price. But less people are also going to demand chips because they're not going to have salsa to go with their chips. With substitutes, it's the exact opposite. Let's think about Coke and Pepsi. If Coke, they suddenly made their recipe half the price, then more people are going to switch to buy Coke. There's going to be an increase in quantity demanded of the Coke, but there's going to be a decrease in demand with the Pepsi because people are leaving Pepsi and switching to Coke. Just kind of think about this reasonably. If the price of a complement goes up, the demand for the other one will go down. If the price for a substitute goes up, that means the demand for the other one will go up. Just think about some complements and substitutes in real life, and then think about how the demand would shift if the price of one increased or decreased. A lot of this is just a logic puzzle, so once you get familiar with the terms and how to deal with the graphs and stuff, it all kind of makes sense if you just think these through. And the final one is price, right? No, that would be a terrible mistake. Price does not affect the demand curve. Price only affects quantity demanded. I can't tell you how many times people get that confused. There's a lot of questions that surround just demand versus quantity demanded. And remember, price only shifts quantity demanded. If we have this point and the price changes, the quantity demanded will change, but it will not shift the demand curve. That's a really important thing to know. So just to review, things that can shift the demand curve: income, remember the normal goods versus inferior goods, expectations, tastes, number of buyers, and then related goods with complements and substitutes. Remember, price does not affect the demand curve at all. It only affects the quantity demanded. The next video up is supply, and hopefully that should be a little bit easier since it uses the same kind of fundamental concepts that you learned in demand. I hope everything made sense in this video. It's quite a tricky subject, and thank you for watching.